flying from Los Angeles to New York City. If the pilot decides to adjust the course 3.5 degrees to the south, the nose of the plane would move just a few feet. Apart from the pilot, no one on board would notice the small movement. But when magnified over the course of the entire United States, you'd end up hundreds of miles apart and alight in Washington, D.C. instead of New York. Because the immediate impact of these tiny changes seem to be negligible, we tend not to notice them at first glance. For example, even if you save some money today, you won't be a millionaire by tomorrow. Even if you work out for 5 days in a row, you'll still be out of shape the next day. But if we are able to consistently repeat these small behaviors, our choices compound into significant results. Time magnifies the margin between success and failure. Sit back and stay on social media for 4 hours a day, and at the end of the year, you would have spent 1,460 hours on it. Spend an hour every day honing a skill you want to improve, and eventually, you'll be far more well-versed in it, even though the change isn't initially as apparent. The first key point is that even the smallest habits can have major results over time. There's a psychologist named Edward Thorndike back in the 19th century who conducted an experiment where cats were placed in a black box. As expected, the cats immediately searched for a way out, and all they had to do to escape was to find a lever that would open the door to enable their escape. Thorndike then had the cats that were successful in escaping repeat the experiment several times. And after being subjected to the experiment, each of the cats eventually went straight for the lever. In about 20 or 30 attempts, the average cat could escape in just 6 seconds. In other words, the process of getting out of the box had become habitual. Thorndike had found that behaviors that give satisfying consequences, which, in this case, is freedom, tend to be repeated until it becomes automatic. This is how habits are formed. Habits begin with a cue. Let's take stress eating as an example. Being stressed cues you to perform an action that will help put you at ease. Next comes a craving for a change in state, in this case, is relief. Then comes our response, or action, which is to eat. The final step in the process, and the goal of every habit, is the reward. Here, it's the feeling of comfort from eating that counteracts stress. Every habit is subject to the same process. In short, habits are behaviors where you don't need to really think about what to do next. It's a behavior that you've repeated so many times to achieve a desired outcome, that it now happens automatically. The second key point is that habits are automated behaviors that give satisfying results. There was a doctor who wanted to improve her patients' dietary habits. Instead of drinking soda, she wanted to encourage them to drink more water without directly confronting them. And she pulled it off simply by having the hospital cafeteria rearranged. Originally, their refrigerators only contained soda, and no water. So what she did was to introduce water in every drinking station in the hospital. Over the span of 3 months, soda sales dropped by 11%, while water sales grew by 25%. Because the cue to drink water rather than soda became more prominent, people began to make healthier choices for themselves. The lesson here is that even the simplest of changes to our surroundings can make the biggest difference in the way we act. If there's an activity you want to do, or a habit you want to pick up, try making your cues as obvious as possible, and you'll be more likely to respond to them. Another great way to reinforce your cues is to be clearer with the specifics, a clear plan of action, and when and where you'll carry out the habit. If you say that you'll work out more often, say instead that you'll work out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, after getting out from the office. This will allow you to have a clear plan along with an obvious cue. The third key point is that hard-to-miss cues and a solid plan of action is essential to building new habits. A pair of neuroscientists back in 1954 conducted an experiment on the neurology of desire. They blocked the release of dopamine, otherwise known as the feel-good hormone in rats, using electrodes. Surprisingly, they've all lost their desire to eat, drink, reproduce, or do anything else. A few days later, they all ended up dying of thirst. Our brain releases dopamine during pleasurable situations such as eating or having sex. Even just anticipating those activities will get us a hit of dopamine. This is our brain's way of driving us and encouraging us to do things. This explains why kids enjoy the anticipation of Christmas, or why daydreaming about an upcoming date or closing a big deal is so pleasurable. We can also turn this knowledge to our advantage when trying to form habits. If we can make our target habit something we look forward to, we'll be much more likely to follow through and do it. For example, if you need to finish a deck for an upcoming presentation but you also want to watch the latest episode of your favorite series, promise yourself to watch it after you're done preparing. By bundling unattractive tasks with something enjoyable, you'll be anticipating a nice reward and will be more encouraged to carry them out. The fourth key point is that using a reward system to make habits more attractive will help you stick to them. Oftentimes, our activity of choice is on behaviors that are easy and require little to no effort to do. Looking through our social media, for example, requires almost no effort, so it becomes easier for us to do it to fill up our time. In contrast, jogging to reach your fitness goals, or even studying that new language you've always wanted to learn, requires a lot more effort to pull off. Now, one of the reasons why habits are hard to adapt is because of the effort required to do it. Therefore, one of the keys to making habits easier to adapt into our daily lives is to make these behaviors as easy to do as possible. The trick is to focus on reducing friction. James Clear himself has always had a difficult time sending greetings cards. His wife, on the other hand, is a different story. She keeps a box of greeting cards, already pre-sorted by occasion, making it easier to send out the appropriate message. Because she doesn't need to go through the hassle of going out to the nearest bookstore and buying the greeting card, there is almost no friction involved in sending one. This method can also be used to discourage yourself from committing bad habits. If you have a deadline and you want to keep yourself from getting distracted from social media, you can try unplugging the router and put it in a drawer. That way, you will introduce an element of friction to help keep you from it, unless of course, you really want to. The fifth key point is to make the activity as easy to adopt as possible to be able to build new habits. Today, we live in what researchers call a delayed return environment. Most of the choices you make today will not benefit you immediately. If you go to the office today, you'll only get your paycheck after a couple of weeks. If you go for a run right now, your weight will most likely still be the same afterwards. The last rule to help encourage behavioral change is to make habits satisfying. But because of the way we evolved, it can be really difficult at times. Our brains aren't designed to solve the problems of the delayed return environment. It developed from its current form while humans still lived in the earlier immediate return environments. People back then weren't concerned about losing weight or saving money for the rainy days. What they were focused on was finding what to eat next, seeking shelter from storms, or even avoiding lions. So when you're trying to build new habits with a delayed return, try attaching some immediate gratification to them. For example, if your goal is to learn a new language, you can reward yourself $5 for every new milestone you reach. The milestone can be as simple as learning 20 new sentences or even holding a 10-minute conversation with someone who is fluent in it. The short-term satisfaction of earning that money will provide the immediate gratification to help keep you on track for the long-term reward. The sixth key point is to make habits satisfying by attaching some form of immediate gratification to it. Managing your habits can be difficult. A simple but effective method to help keep you in check is to track it. One of the most well-known personalities who used a habit tracker is Benjamin Franklin. He believed that even his own desire for self-improvement wasn't in itself enough to beat the force of habit. First, he went through a process of understanding his own values that he wanted to express in life by changing his habits. He then kept a notebook in which he recorded these, and noted his successes at the end of each day. Another technique is to develop a habit contract that imposes negative consequences if you fail to stay on track. For example, if your goal is to get your weight down to 150 pounds, you'll first need to identify specific habits that would get you there, which may include tracking your food intake each day and weighing yourself each week. Afterwards, set penalties for yourself in case you fail to do these things. Sign a contract with someone close to you, be it a close friend or a family member. If you fail to track your food intake, a possible consequence is to pay $50. If you failed to weigh yourself, you can pay $100. This strategy is effective because of not only the fear of losing money, but also because of the fear of losing face in front of someone that matters to you. If you agree upon a set of consequences for failing to follow through, you'll be much more likely to stick to your ideal habits. The last key point is to use trackers and contracts to help keep your habits on the right path.